Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they are the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Allenson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jason Quinones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here with you guys. Happy New Year. Just getting started, huh?
Yeah, this is our first podcast of the new year.
Yeah.
Excited. Our first recording anyway. I'm not sure when this will come out, but, there it is.
New year, new show. We're at Site C.
Yeah.
Site C.
Very excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
And, we have big goals for this podcast this year.
Yeah.
We want to expand our reach. We want to get in front of the ears of more men. And so we're going to talk about this at the end of the show too. But, it's a good time to hit that subscribe button, to share the show with someone who you think would benefit from listening to the Forge Truth Podcast, like or comment on the podcast platform of your choice. We would love it if you would help spread the word about the Forge Truth Podcast. So take that opportunity right now, and then let's get into it. Pete,
Yeah.
you want to introduce our guest today?
Yeah. But I want to ask you a quick question first, because this always threw me off as a guy my age, right? Subscribe doesn't mean you're paying.
No, it's free.
It's free. It's a free subscription.
Yeah, it's a free podcast. Yeah.
Okay. But now if they want to pay, they can kick in.
Here's what subscribe means, okay? It doesn't mean you're paying $4.99 a month or anything like that.
Yeah.
It means that when there's a new episode, it'll automatically come to your phone. So you're never going to miss an episode if you subscribe.
There you go.
Depending on the platform that you're listening to, hit that subscribe button.
Okay, I said that for guys my age. Younger guys, you all get that.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a special guest. Bob Eichelberger is one of our board members from Forge, and a man who is in the Navy for years and years and years. And we're going to talk today with you about your military experience as well as what you did to help military families. Bob, welcome. Good to have you here.
Well, thanks. It's good to be here, Pete.
Yeah, man. So tell us about your military history. Tell us some of the things you did as Navy. Now, again, my dad was Army, and
My dad was Army.
Your dad was Army too, so we got two Army against one Navy here. So
my dad
go
was
Army,
none of the
beat
above.
Navy is what they say at West Point, right? But you say go Navy,
Beat Army.
beat Army, yeah. And Navy beat Army big time in football this year.
Yes, I won a sweatshirt from my daughter.
Awesome.
She was in the Army, and we made a bet. She owed me an Army sweatshirt because Navy won the game, and it's a tradition that goes back, hundreds of years. Well, not hundreds of years, but at least 100 years. You'd make a bet of a bathrobe or a sweatshirt or something with someone from the opposite team. And
Is that right?
yes.
I didn't know that. We need to do that next year, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. night.
Collect some bathrobes.
I didn't even have a bath. Anyway, Bob, tell us about your military history. What did you do? I mean, how early did you go into the Navy?
Well, I left Butler, Pennsylvania in the end of my senior year in high school, where President Trump was taking a shot at this last fall, and went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland in June of 1971.
Wow.
Now, hold on. The Naval Academy, that sounds hard to get into to me. Was that difficult to get into?
It's interesting. I had a friend who wanted to go into the Naval Academy, and I wanted to go to the ROTC program, and neither of us got our first wish. I got appointed to Annapolis, and he got appointed to the University of Colorado's ROTC program.
Huh. Interesting. So you do have to, you have to have pretty good grades.
Have to have good grades. You have to pass a civil service exam for your congressman to kind of rank you as to, he's allowed to make 10 nominations to the academy each year, and he has allowed to have 5 appointed midshipmen at the academy at any one time. So that's true for senators and congressmen, and then there are a variety of other nomination paths for the president and the vice president to be able to make nominations to the service academies.
So it's a rare club.
So he was already an impressive person at this point.
Dude.
Just going
yeah,
into
I know,
the
man.
academy.
I wouldn't have, not me at that level. Bishop, at that
I was getting no nominations, that's for sure.
So you got nominated, you got put in, and you went to Annapolis. What was that like? It's a beautiful camp. Have you guys been to Annapolis?
No, not professionally.
Oh, it's a beautiful campus.
It is. And a very inspirational place to go
Yeah.
because of all the monuments and all the history and the traditions associated with the naval service. And it developed quite a sense of pride in the midshipmen as they went through their 4 years there. I was lucky enough to go back there and teach twice as an officer. And they weren't really teaching positions. I was a company officer and a battalion officer, which meant I was in charge of roughly 120 midshipmen the first time. And then as a senior officer, I was in charge of 6 companies, which came to about 600 or almost 720 midshipmen.
Wow. While you were there.
While I was there, yes.
That's amazing.
So, Bob, I have a question, just kind of backing up. So we know how you got there. What was your inspiration like? What made you want to go into the military?
Well, I fell in love with submarines as a young man. My grandfather and my father were both employees of Westinghouse Corporation, and they both had jobs that had them involved with the construction of the first submarines. And so they were always talking about how neat they were, and I think it kind of grew on me. And that was the Naval Academy was one way avenue of getting to go to the Naval Academy. It was getting to go into the submarine force, and that was when I was growing up. We lost 2 nuclear submarines, the Scorpion and the Thresher, due to a variety of reasons, but they lost everyone in the crew on both of those accidents. And to this day, they're still not sure exactly how it happened, but it prompted an awful lot of changes in the way that submarines were constructed and the way they were operated in order to prevent that from ever happening again. So they haven't lost a submarine since 1967, I believe.
Wow. Did they find those submarines?
Yes, they have.
Did they
using
recover
deep,
them at all?
No,
Too deep?
just too deep.
Wow. Huh. I remember as a kid when the Nautilus came out, right? So that was the first nuclear-powered submarine?
Yes, it was.
And we had a model of the Nautilus. You remember the Nautilus? Yeah. You're not impressed, Zach.
No, I'm very impressed. Pete recommended a book to me called Nuclear War, and it's basically what happens if a nuclear war gets launched by anywhere in the world, what happens in the next 90 minutes, basically, of the chain of command and all the decision making and that kind of thing. And so I feel like I'm very impressed by this world right now of like all the technology and everything that's in place. So.
Yeah, and of course the nuclear subs, according to Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War, the safest place to be is an Ohio-class submarine during a nuclear strike. But we can talk about that some more.
Yes.
You started out. So you went to the academy. Did you get into the sub program right away?
No. The Academy's a regular college, a 4-year program.
Okay.
And I became a physics major in hopes that would help me with the selection process with Admiral Rickover. And I had interesting interviews with him, and he knew my grandfather fairly well, and my interviews with him circled around how my family should have done a better job of raising me. Or rearing me, yes.
Wow.
And so after 4 years at the Naval Academy, I went to nuclear power school and to submarine school and went to my first ship. And
Nuclear power school, was that here in Orlando?
I was the last class in Bainbridge, Maryland before they moved it down to Orlando.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when I was taking my comprehensive examination at the end, they were moving desks out as the students were completing their exams to get them down to Orlando for the next Monday morning class start.
No. Because when we came here to plant a church years ago, the nuclear school was here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's now Baldwin Park.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They turned it all into that area over there. Amazing. Okay, so where was that? Washington?
It was in Bainbridge, Maryland.
Maryland. And then, so you went to school there, and how long was that program?
The entire program lasted a year. It was 6 months of academic training and then 6 months at a operating reactor plant. Mine was in Windsor, Connecticut. And it was a prototype for a unique, one-of-a-kind submarine that they built to test out new platforms and new equipment in the engine room. And so I spent 6 months there qualifying as an engineering officer of the watch on that prototype plant. And we'd start it up every day and shut it down at the end of our watch, and they put it through quite a lot of cycles. But I learned to operate all the junior watch stations to a much lesser degree than the officer station that I was being trained on. But at the end of that period of time, I was at least dangerous enough to send to a submarine and learn how to operate that particular reactor plant.
Wow. So they were nuclear when you came in. You never were. Diesel boats were, because we got some guys at Forge, some old guys, and they had the diesel boats, right? So that was World War II up to 60?
Well, they had some into the early 70s, and there were no opportunities for Naval Academy graduates to choose diesel submarines as a career path at that point.
Wouldn't have made sense, right?
No, they were going away.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. That's good. That's good.
So then after that, you're placed in a ship.
I was placed in a ship, and it takes a year to qualify on that ship once you get there. There are a variety of watch stations that an officer has to qualify on. The first one is the engine room, because you've just been trained on that for the last year, so they want it to be fresh in your mind. And you learn how to supervise a watch section of about 12 people who are operating the reactor plant, testing the water chemistry for the steam generators in the reactor plant, operating the turbines, operating the electric plant and the reactor itself. And so you have to understand to a pretty fine degree what each of those jobs entails, because you're giving them orders to do things and have to understand how those things all interact with each other so that you don't give two contradictory orders at the same time.
Yeah. It could be a nuclear. I mean, think about having a nuclear reactor right there. Right there. That's what you had.
Yep.
Now, at that point, when you first went on, did you have nuclear torpedoes or weapons at the same time that you had in those early nuclear subs?
Well, the appropriate answer for that, I can neither confirm nor deny that we carried nuclear weapons.
Okay. So here we go, right? Because
Here it starts.
Bob's our friend, and he tells us what he can't tell us.
Yeah.
So there it is. It always ticks me off.
I don't think it's security clearance stuff. I think it's memory loss at this point.
Oh.
I think he's just covering for he just doesn't remember anymore.
I appreciate that. It could be.
No fishing allowed.
Yeah, exactly.
So in other words, there's stuff you can't tell us, right?
There's things I can't tell you, but I can tell you one of the most interesting things I did on my first ship was make an Arctic deployment. And we surfaced through the ice 13 times, including once at the North Pole.
Wow.
And
So you've been to the North Pole.
I've been to the North Pole and surfaced through about 5 feet of ice at the North Pole.
Incredible. Did you plant a flag?
We did.
Okay, good.
We planted a flag. We took a man in a Santa Claus outfit and put him up on the ice so we could take pictures for our children and show them that we'd actually seen Santa Claus.
5 feet of ice, though.
Yes.
Thinking about that. So the sub had to break through it. Was it solid?
Yes, but the one nice thing is that the submarine had the sonar capabilities to determine where there were open sheets of ice that had just recently frozen over. And so you didn't have any ice keels or any ice ridges that were projecting above the surface. And so those places were called plinias, and you would station the ship directly underneath that smooth section of ice, and it could be up to 5 feet thick and be able to go through. And the superstructure of the ship and the sail and the rudder all had guards over the navigation lights, for instance, and over the masts for the periscope and the antennas, so that the ice wouldn't damage those. You'd be able to take the antennas and put them in a recessed position so they wouldn't bang against the ice.
That's what I was wondering. All that stuff could have gotten broken off. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. All right. So the North Pole, you think, well, that's cool, but the North Pole is incredibly strategic for our national security interests. And is that why you guys went up there at that point?
We went up there in order to test several things, especially a sonar system that allowed us to safely navigate where the water got shallow and the ice was deep, and there was very little room for you to go deeper or to go shallower without running into something. And we actually made a transit down through the northern Canadian islands. We started over by the coast of Alaska and came all the way down through the northern island chains of Canada into Baffin Bay, and used our sonar in order to navigate through through those channels. And there were ice teams that they put up on the ice, and they'd drill holes and put sonars down through the ice to see if they could detect us as we were coming down through those channels.
Huh. Wow. A lot of experimentation.
That's amazing. Like, how navigable are they? Like, could you go up the Mississippi River?
No, the Mississippi River, well, you can go on the surface up the Mississippi River.
Okay.
But it's just not deep enough.
Not just be submerged, no.
Yeah. What do you have ideas, Zach?
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I know.
That's great. So how long were you on that ship, and then what was your next?
I was on that ship for 3.5 years, and one of the reasons I stayed on so long is that I'd voiced my intention to leave the Navy, and so they didn't send me on to shore duty at the end of 3 years the way that they normally would. And as that last 6 months went by, I had done a special operation with the submarine that really piqued my interest in submarine operations and what they were able to do. I had spent a year in the shipyard with that ship, and it had kind of turned me off to being on submarines. But when we went on that operation, it changed my heart, and I decided to stay. And so that's why I had an extended junior officer tour. But then I was sent to the Naval Academy to help recruit midshipmen into the submarine force. There had been a period of time in 1980 where submarines were not the most popular choice for midshipmen. They all wanted to be pilots. And so they sent a group of us to go to the Naval Academy to do our best to try to sell midshipmen on the submarine force and what submarines were capable of doing, and the excitement of doing that as a career choice.
Of course, we're in the Cold War, and this is huge.
Yes.
And you got to have those subs.
Yes.
Wow.
The year before I got there, they actually had to draft people who wanted to be Navy pilots into the submarine force. And that was a very difficult decision for the Navy leadership to make, but it also turned out to be a very bad decision in retrospect, because an awful lot of those individuals were not happy with that choice, and it really detracted from their careers.
Right. All right, so I mean, there's so many details on this. We could talk forever, but get us up to you eventually became captain of a sub.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I got to command USS Kamehameha out of Pearl Harbor for 3 years, and it was kind of a dream come true and an opportunity of a lifetime. I really enjoyed a lot of the aspects of it. I still am in terror of some of the aspects of the job that I had. We had 2 SEAL teams on board, and we would deploy them while the ship was submerged, and in either miniature submarines or in combat rubber raiding craft. And with the ship near the surface, one of the hazards of a submarine is that you'd have a rogue wave, or the sea state would be strong enough that the Bernoulli effect would cause the submarine to be sucked up towards the surface. And when you had heavy equipment, including a multi-thousand-pound submersible laying on a cradle on the outside of the ship, the prospect of broaching the ship and having that cradle fall down on top of the SEALs that were working outside the submarine was quite a concern that I had almost every day that we operated with the SEALs, which was almost every day that we went to sea. We were either training with them or operating with them.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was like a daily risk that you had to worry about.
It was a daily risk that I had to keep the crew on edge all the time, and never let them get comfortable with what they were doing. And that ended up being one of the biggest challenges of my command tour.
Yeah. What came naturally to you about that role, and then what was the biggest struggle as far as like not your natural talents?
Well, I think what came naturally was the fact that I'd been trained on 4 other submarines before I went to command. I had already been a chief engineer on a ship and a navigator and operations officer and an executive officer. And so I had all the other officer positions that were going to be operating underneath me in command. And so I had confidence in my ability to help train and direct the operations of the ship. But the one thing that was the big unknown to me was Kamehameha was an older ship. It was when I got to command, the ship was 27 years old, and had been on 63 deterrent patrols as a ballistic missile submarine. And so it had been ridden hard, and it was still in very good shape. But the older a submarine gets, the more challenges it meets on a maintenance schedule and on a repair schedule. And so I had been chief engineer on the USS SKATE, which was the 3rd nuclear submarine ever built and the first one ever to surface at the North Pole. And so I had had experience with old ships and what they were up against. And it was hard to train the crew to understand exactly what they needed to do over and above the normal preventive maintenance schedules and the normal inspections that they may have been used to doing on their other ships that they had come from that might have been newer and less maintenance intensive.
You know, all these old World War II movies that I watched about submarine stuff, you know, they got leaky pipes and all that kind of stuff. Did that happen on any of the subs that you were on? I mean, do you have leaks sometimes?
Oh, sure.
Really?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I actually had a minor flooding casualty on the ship I was chief engineer on, where a bolt had been replaced in a seawater system for the evaporator that had been a galvanized plug. It wasn't stainless steel or Inconel. It was made out of carbon steel with a galvanized coating on it. And we were doing a test depth dive, and that plug decided to let loose under our reactor plant control panel, and sprayed water all up inside the control room for the reactor plant, and we ended up having to scram the reactor, surface the ship, start the diesel engine, and pump the bilges of all the water that had come in, dry off the reactor plant control panel, which took quite a while to do, and restart the reactor. And the only reason the flooding stopped is SKATE was a ship that had a retrofit for a system called the Submarine Safe System, which allowed you to shut all the hull valves. But we were short on water, and so we'd made the decision to continue operating the evaporator while we were at test depth. And so when that evaporator started leaking, all the hull valves shut except for the overboard discharge from the evaporator. So there was a junior officer outside the maneuvering area who just started shutting all the green valves he could find. He was brand new to the ship, and he's the one who actually stopped the water from coming in through that 1-inch hole that we had.
Wow.
I was asleep at the time of the casualty, and so I ended up in the engine room in my skivvies, directing the actions, and it was about 2 hours before I was able to go and put some clothes on. So
wow, you gave the men a show. I mean, that's incredible.
Well, everybody was in their skivvies.
Yeah. Wow. So it was kind of in the middle of the night, or?
Well, night is a strange thing on submarines. They've changed the watch schedule, I hear, since I've left the Navy. But it used to be that the watches were 6 hours long, and there were 3 shifts. And so you would wake up at a different time every day in order to stand your watch. So one morning you'd wake up and it would be breakfast. The next day you'd wake up and it would be leftovers from the meals before. The next day you'd wake up and it would be time for dinner. And you'd go through that cycle for as long as the ship was at sea, which was routinely 60 to 70 days.
What does that do to a man?
Your circadian rhythm gets all out of whack. But that's why they drink a lot of coffee on board submarines.
I would guess. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, Bob, I'm sure you have a million stories, and I want to hear every single one of them. But I do want to talk a little bit about something you told me once. The pressures on marriages in the military is kind of well known. It's hard to be deployed and away from your spouse. I think this was something that was important to you, and it was really an initiative that you really took hold of on your ship. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I had been at sea for 3.5 years on my first tour, and I had married right out of the Naval Academy, and my wife had gone with me through the nuclear power training and the Submarine School, and through that entire first tour, and then most of my tour at the Naval Academy before we had a separation and a divorce before I went back to sea. And the going back to sea was, I think, the primary issue in that is that the loneliness and the separation was something that was very difficult on our marriage. And so I took that responsibility into my command tour, that I really wanted to help alleviate some of the issues that could be addressed in helping families make it through long deployments and periods of separation, when the ship would go to sea on a Monday morning and come home on a Friday afternoon, and then do the same thing the next week and the next week, and then go on a 6-month deployment after that. And so a great part of my effort was just built on my faith in God, and in the fact that I really felt that divorce was not an answer to anyone's problems, and that the oath that we make at the marriage ceremony is one that we should take seriously. And it was my job as kind of the father figure on board the ship, in order to be able to help support what the crew was trying to do with their families at home. And we had about half the crew was married and half the crew were single. But my faith led me to do several things that I thought were beneficial in order to help the crews stay together with their families. The first thing I did was remove any pornographic type images that were floating around the ship. They were they'd be on bulletin boards on most Navy ships, especially submarines, I believe. As a matter of fact, it was rampant when I first started, but as I went through my career, it became less and less. But it was still an image that I think really defrauded the women in the men's lives. And it was something that was unnecessary for them to have to think about and ponder while they were away from their families. The second thing that we did was try to keep communications while the ship was at sea. If we knew that a birthday was coming up for a child or an anniversary was coming up, if we were close enough to shore, we would hook up a cell phone to one of our communications antennas that was tuned to the same broadcast frequency, and we could make phone calls off the coast of Australia, off the coast of Guam to families back in Hawaii where the ship was stationed.
That's great.
And my wife was also very, very key in having meetings with the wives while the ship was deployed, and she could detect very easily when a family was starting to have problems. Either the wife would stop coming to the parties, or she would come and there'd be snide comments or difficult situations that would be related to some of the other wives, and they were always good at including Francie into those discussions. And then Francie would go to the Commodore and have a message sent out to the ship, eyes only to the captain, that there was a situation going on, and then I was able to help minister to the man who was having those issues at sea.
I bet that was rare in the submarine force.
Well, I think an awful lot of commanding officers felt the same concern, and I was not surprised at all. I mean, submarine duty is a place where faith is generated. there are so many things that are outside your purview that I think you end up developing a faith in God to help support you in difficult situations, finding out what is wrong before things actually become disasters, being able to relate to the men who are having these challenges of being away from home and learning new jobs and having to lead at their own levels within the ship. And one of the challenging situations is being a junior officer when you come to the ship and most of the men on board the ship are at least 5 years older than you are, and you're their boss. And the guy that you're directing to is probably old enough to be your father. And so it takes an awful lot of character building and I think faith building in order to be able to survive that type of environment as a young officer. When I was at the Naval Academy, they had a prayer that was part of the liturgy that they would do during the services, which were the first 2 years I was there, that was mandatory to go to church. And we would actually march in company to the chapel, which was quite a big cathedral. They called it a chapel. But they had a prayer that after repeating it, 60 times during services during my first 2 years there or so, became part of a liturgy in my own life, which I didn't really appreciate very much until I got to command. And then I realized exactly how much meaning there was in that prayer. And it encompassed all the aspects of being a commanding officer and what you needed to think about and what you needed to pray about in the way that you conducted yourself on board the ship.
Wow. Do you know it now? Would you be able to say it?
I think I can say it now.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Almighty Father, whose ways are in the sea, whose paths are in the great waters, whose command is over all, and whose love never faileth. Let me be aware of thy presence and obedient to thy will. Keep me true to my best self, guarding me against dishonesty in purpose and in deed, and helping me so to live that I can stand unashamed and unafraid before my shipmates, my loved ones, and thee. Protect those in whose love I live. Give me the will to do the work of a man and to accept my share of responsibilities with a strong heart and a cheerful mind. Make me considerate of those entrusted to my leadership and faithful to the duties my country has entrusted to me. Let my uniform remind me daily of the traditions of the service of which I am a part. If I am inclined to doubt, steady my faith. If I am tempted, make me strong to resist. If I should miss the mark, give me the courage to try again. Guide me with the light of truth, and keep me for me the life of him who by whose example and help I trust to obtain the answer to my prayer. Jesus Christ, my Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Wow.
That's great.
So now, just to be clear, when was the last time you said that before today?
When I was in command of the submarine, 1995.
That's awesome. Okay, one last question. What was the fruit of your efforts for the men on your ship?
Well, out of the 3 years that I was in command, we set what a lot of people considered a record, in that we had no divorces during that entire time. And that was including the fact that we had 4 men get married coming out of the shipyard where we were converted to carrying SEALs on board the ship. In Mare Island, California, there was a bar there called the Horse and Cow, and 4 of my sailors met their wives there and got married within the 6-month period that the ship was actually there at the shipyard. And each of those marriages survived the rigors of moving those families to Hawaii and away from their families. And it was an interesting twist to my command tour, was having those 4 marriages go on.
Well, that's great. Well, Bob, we're really grateful you came on the show, and thank you for talking to us about your experiences in that role. And I want to thank everyone at home for listening to this episode of the Forge Truth Podcast. If you have any questions or comments on what we talked about, you can email the show at forge@forgetruth.com. And we would love if you help get the word out about the show. There's a couple things that you can do. One is to subscribe for free to this podcast so that you get the latest episode. Another is to like it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just hit the like button. You can also leave a comment. That helps the algorithm know that people are engaged and interested in the content that we're producing. And then also, if there's someone in your life who you think would enjoy this episode, please share it with them and help get this in front of more ears and eyes of men who could benefit from it. Jason, do you want to leave a challenge for our men today?
Yeah, well, first, Bob, let me say thank you for your service. I really appreciate you. And thank you for sharing your story. I know you have much more to share. To all the guys that are listening that have served, we thank you so much for your service. And as I was listening, one of the things that I realized is how important we are in understanding the challenges that our service members undergo. Their marriages are stressed, their work is stressful. And so we as men can make sure that we're praying for these families consistently. Don't take it for granted, but really lift them up in prayer. And as you hear Bob's story, I want you to remember, guys, there's nothing impossible for God. And so no matter how great the challenge is, know that prayer and action together can bring miracles like the one he described today.